Begin real quick by reinforcing the shape in the canvas. Domette side up, hold one half of the canvas and steam it. Then let the steam evaporate out. Then do the same on the other side. You can very clearly see the boob of the jacket above the dart, and that is what we want to preserve. We should usually start with the left jacket front with the outbreast pocket. With the correct pieces, lay the front right side up on top of the canvas, lining up the front dart. The hems will be flush with each other, or should be, and the grains of the fabric should match, and there should be about 2.5 centimeters along the front still. The break lines should align as well. Between all of this, we can accurately line up the front and the canvas together. To baste the canvas and forepart together, I suggest knotting each piece of thread. To start, mark 12 centimeters down from the shoulder above the center front dart. With your knotted basting thread, start a couple of centimeters up from the pocket. You don't want to catch any of the pocket under the back welt or flap that goes up the jacket. Baste to one side of the dart and start basting up towards the mark you made. What is most important when basting the forepart to the canvas is that it is essentially pulled taut or snug over it. Hence, as you baste upwards, smooth the front over the canvas as you stitch until you get to the top and secure the thread there. Leave some thread tailing at the end so that if you have pulled the stitch too tight, then you can loosen it. Start the next line halfway between the first and the break line, level with the top button. This time, smooth out from the first line of the basting, as well as making sure it's smooth going upwards as well. However, if the fabric starts pulling and rumpling between the lines, you've gone too far with it. Finish the line just next to where the first finished. Line 3 is 2 centimeters from the break line, starting at the top button, and ending parallel to the first two, doing the same as the second, smoothing the fabric out. For the next baste, measure about an inch below the armhole and 3 or 4 centimeters from the mark stitches around it. Start on the first line of basting, level with the top button, and begin to baste a curved line towards the armhole, absolutely still making sure to smooth out the fabric so that there isn't any excess fabric atop the canvas between the bastes. Stop an inch from the top of the dart, secure the thread and start to curve around the armhole towards the point where the first baste finished again, being sure not to get too close to the armhole or it may make stitching in the sleeve more difficult than it needs to be. On the bottom half of the jacket now, start the baste between the first and the break line. Baste towards the hem, hand railing the curve, and stop shy 2.5 centimeters up from the mark stitching. As with the first, smoothing down over the canvas as you go. Start the next line of basting below the line next to the break line, always smoothing the fabric away from the previous line towards the front edge. Follow the curve and secure the thread in front in about the same place as the first. To demonstrate what we're looking for, you can see that there's no excess cloth between the bastes to the canvas. I'm not creating any excess bubbles as I try to push the cloth over the canvas between the bastes. Flip the canvas over, feel through and chalk around the welts of the pocket. If you cut that rectangle out, you should be able to move the whole of the pocket to the other side of the body canvas. If not, just keep chopping away until you can. Flip the jacket back over and put something between the body canvas and the pocket's silesia so that you won't sew through it. Start on top around the middle of the pocket and baste towards the front, then down the front and back towards the middle. Make sure the cloth is still cleaned away from the previous bastes over the canvas, then straight down to the hem from there, being sure to push out any excess, keeping the canvas and fabric flat together. Keep ending a little above the first two bastes on the bottom. Again, after this point, because we shaped the canvas, we don't want to fold it too harshly. We could, and even should, even press shape into the pair again. Stitch the pocket to the canvas now, starting along the top of the pocket where the canvas begins. Cross-stitch the pocket cloth onto the canvas only really stitching until the bottom of the facing of the pocket. Cut away all of the excess canvas so that it's all flush with the forepart. Copy the break line onto the demet. I make a basting stitch from the front where I can see the break line, and then I chalk over it and remove the basting thread. Trim away the demet and chest canvas at the break line, then trim off another ½ centimeter of the chest canvas. Put some silesia underneath the lapel and copy off the break line. Cut the silesia flush with the edge of the lapel and 2 centimeters above the break point. Both lapels should be at least very close to identical, so you can use doubled up silesia and cut the two you need at once. Lay it between the fabric and the body canvas as you cut it, so flush with the edge. Baste it in along the break line, still smoothing the fabric over the canvas from the baste just next to the break line. Then another baste on the inside edge of the lapel. Cut a piece of lining or silesia 4 centimeters wide and exceeding the length of the break line. Lay one end on the break line 1 centimeter over the demet at the top of the lapel. Baste it in place with only a couple of stitches at the top. At the bottom of the demet, chalk a mark between the bridle and demet. You're going to pull the bridle down, making a 1 centimeter difference between the marks you made, thereby putting ease into the forepart over the chest. Baste in ease down to the mark. Secure the basting and baste the bridle flat down to the bottom of the demet, which similarly keeps it above the top button. Secure the other side of the bridle as well. Shrink the canvas and ease in place with some steam and the iron, with something like a sleeve board under your chest in order to keep its shape. To pad stitch the lapel, start by either basting or chalking the mark stitched front edge onto the body canvas, all the way up and across for the effect of seeing the border of where you need to stop padding. Mark where you want the notch of the lapel. In my case, about half the width is 4 centimeters from the tip. I need a step at this midpoint. I copy it and the front edge onto the canvas, so that I don't pad stitch above where I want the top of the lapel, but behind the step I'm padding above it. Only 1.5 centimeters though, so I mark that on. Before moving straight on, we need to get the other side up to speed and check that the lapels will be the same. So we mark on the break line and the center front to measure that the lapel width is the same, as well as where we put the step. For the last time, with the finest thread you have, ideally the same color as the main body of your cloth, we will wax and begin padding. Start on the Demet side of the bridle. The needle has to move towards the edge of the lapel, I'd try to keep the stitches about 1.5 centimeters from each other and keep them narrow as well. The first 3 rows are padded flat to keep the bridle in place, then after that we're shaping the canvas. It's very similar to padding the chest canvas, except you definitely need to only catch the smallest possible amount of fabric. In a similar vein, using a thread of the same colour of fabric where available. Don't pull the stitches too tight, otherwise you may not be able to press in the ease created. Again, we can do these more loosely or more densely. Neither is objectively better than the other. Smaller will be more structured, and larger will create a softer lapel. You'll run out of thread a few times, I'm sure you can figure that one out. Depending on the size of the lapel, you'll need around 7 meters of thread. And I like to split that into 1 1/5 meter lengths. When you get to the top and bottom of each line, start the next stitch halfway down the last. I go into more detail in general in the first hand stitches video. Don't cross the border that you chalked, which may sound dumb to say, but somehow I managed it on my first time. Try to secure the last stitch at the very top corner. I'm not sure if that's necessary though. I suppose I'll also link an uncut, unlisted version in the description again. By virtue of what you're doing, you may need to remove the baste near the edge of the lapel before we're finished. Realistically though, you need to be comfortable, and I don't find leaning over a table to pad for 30 minutes comfortable. Like at all. For the sake of filming, I sat on my chair and leant back and put up my leg in order to put the roll on it, which is definitely an improvement. Remove the various bits of redundant basting as applicable. So I would say the bridle basting and the baste on the lapel, if not already. Press the lapel now to stretch and or shrink the canvas and fabric so that it's flat to make it easier to work with. It'll return to how it was padded together over time and roll nicely again later though, so don't worry. Having decided where you want the notch on the lapel to start, mark it straight up to the top of your inlay, usually around half the lapel width. Mark on the break line to check the lapel width so that you can use it as a check that they're both the same again. Chalk on the mark stitched whole front seam, if not already, all the way around the hem. Where the curve stops, chalk down to the end of the inlay from there. Give the entire front line that you just chalked a 1 cm seam allowance from the notch to the bottom of the curve that you marked on the hem. Mark the hem onto the body canvas as well, and cut that away, if a little higher than the mark stitches, like 1 millimeter or so. Cut away the cloth and the canvas beyond that seam allowance, from the notch to the line down to the hem. On the other jacket front, we need to make sure they are done identically. Chalk the mark stitches and seam allowances so that you can line up your first to the second. Pin them together starting at the breakpoint, and you want them flat against each other, matching the break lines and hems. Cut away the second side. Flip it canvas side up again and cut away a big centimetre of the body canvas all the way up to the notch. A big centimetre, comparable to a small centimetre, is going to be about 11 or 12 millimetres, and makes it easier to not catch the canvas when we sew on the facing. We should know that the mark stitches on the front are going to be the machine line, so we can cut the canvas down to the point that we can see the mark stitches. You notice I have cut away the silicea that I put underneath the canvas. Recently I tried leaving the silicea and using that instead of putting edge tape onto the lapel. That might not mean anything to you unless you're familiar with my methods already though. You need bias tape now. It's lining, linen, silicea, cut on the bias, and you can buy it as a roll, or you can cut a few meters of your lining on the bias, 2 centimeters wide. If you get it on the roll, you ought to stretch it a little with the iron. Line it up to the top of the lapel and baste it to the edge down the middle of the edge tape. Ideally, line it up to the edge of the cloth without overbearing it, so that we can easily find our 1 centimeter from the edge. As we baste it down, we are not pulling on it at all, we're just letting it sit where it wants to sit. Getting to the break, fasten the thread. Getting to the break, tack the thread. At this stage we want to pull out the tension of the edge tape. We're not pulling it, just making sure that there is no excess at all. Like pulling it slightly. Once you get to the curve, secure the baste again and start to pull on the tape as you continue to baste it around the curve. This time we are using the elastic property of the tape and pulling on it as we go around the curve, which is what will hold the front edge of the jacket inwards as it hangs. Fasten the baste a little past where the hem inlay starts. Back at the top of the lapel, you need a few centimeters of the edge tape to go over the top edge of the lapel. To secure the edge tape, you'll need about 4 meters of thread for both fronts. Start at the top corner of the lapel, on the shoulder line side of the bias tape, and slip stitch the tape to the canvas. Go all the way around to the edge of the lapel and secure the thread. Then slip stitch the piece that goes down the front only to the canvas. If it's done right, the tape is going to pull on the bottom of the curve, so iron it flat and give the rest of the tape a cursory iron as well. You'll likely start at the top and bottom of the edge tape on the left and right jacket respectively, and we are slip stitching the tape to the canvas only, not going through to the fabric. Though on the lapel it's pad stitched, so you could practically be pad stitching the edge tape to the jacket. At the edge tape on the top of the lapel, you need to secure around it, ending or starting as appropriate on the shoulder line side at the notch. Keep the stitches around 1 centimeter between themselves, so relatively dense, because that's what's holding the canvas in place when the facing is being machined on. The edge tape can be substituted for a fusible edge tape so long as it has the same kind of stretch properties as our edge tape, so that we can achieve the same result. It's fine to use because by the time we're finished, the canvas will be being held by a prick stitch, so if the fusing becomes unstuck, it literally doesn't matter. It's only to hold up the canvas while we sew the facing on. And for now, we're going to leave all the basting in.